Hey everyone, Brooklyn here. In this video, we're going to go over how to read encounters and explain how to use them. Whether you're playing the crawl mode or the adventure mode, the rest of the videos in this set of how to play videos are relevant to both modes. So let's dive right in. This is an example of one of the earlier encounters in our adventure mode called Bombing the Sickles. Let's go over all the different things spread between the two pages. So encounters are made up of multiple sections: the title, the location icon, the flavor text, the north arrow, the setup diagram, the setup box, end conditions, special encounter rules, loot, objectives, and totems. First of all, you'll notice that the top of the encounter has a red header with the title, Bombing the Sickles. The red header lets players quickly know that Bombing the Sickles is an encounter. This red header can be especially useful when flipping through our giant adventure book while trying to find a specific encounter. In the top right of the encounter header, you'll see the location icon. This icon has no mechanical bearing as of right now and is only used for a locational fluff. In this example, the encounter is located at an underground location. Below the header is the flavor text. This text sets context for what the adventurers are seeing and feeling. It can also contain valuable clues that can help attentive players perform better during the encounter. Oh, and we also voiced over these sections of flavor text in our companion app, so if you don't want to read them out loud, you can listen to them just like the narrative. To the right of the flavor text is the north arrow. This arrow is important to keep in mind when setting up the encounter, since many spawns and special rules will reference north, east, south, and west in relation to this icon. Below the flavor text and north arrow is an image of the encounter setup with all the pieces and tokens required to play the encounter. You'll find that the setup box can be useful as it itemizes every component used in the encounter. Due to our tiles looking very different though, we've never really had too much of an issue setting up encounters by simply eyeballing the image depicted in the encounter setup. But the setup box can still be useful if you're not sure what pieces you need based on the image of the encounter alone. Some encounters can continue, spanning multiple pages, just like scenes in the adventure mode. Make sure not to overlook this when playing an encounter, as some encounters can even be 3 or 4 pages long. The last thing you want to do is get halfway in and realize that there's more information on the next page. Cool, so now we can go over the different sets of text that nearly all encounters will share. First, you have the end conditions. The end conditions quickly tell players what win conditions and lose conditions are available. In addition, it's possible for an encounter to have more than one win or one lose condition. We call these alternate win and alternate lose conditions. As soon as one of the listed requisites is met under one of these end conditions, the encounter immediately ends and the players read the corresponding reward text of the end condition that was met. After receiving the reward listed, the players will continue to the listed page of the next scene or encounter printed beneath the reward. Next up are the special encounter rules. Special encounter rules represent all the specific rules associated with any given encounter. They can vary wildly and change a lot about how the encounter is played, so it's important to read them before starting any encounter. For example, in Bombing the Sickles, the cave sickles are afraid of falling, and they just won't jump over dangerous terrain during the entirety of this encounter. Loot is another common set of hidden text on every encounter. You'll notice that it has 4 different colors of loot listed. Not all encounters will have all 4 listed, but many do. What this means is when an adventurer picks up a loot token via an encounter action, depending on its color, the players will read what is found under the corresponding colored loot section in the encounter. So, if you pick up the yellow loot, you'll read the yellow loot hidden text. Objective tokens are similar in that they come in a variety of colors. However, objective tokens always represent different and unique things. Depending on the encounter, how they function, when their text is read, or what they do will change. In the example of Bombing the Sickles, the only objective token is the blue objective token. It specifically says how it activates under the blue token section on the encounter. It says, When an adventurer is adjacent to this token, read the following hidden text. So, using these rules, adventurers can know when and how objective tokens activate. A special note about objective tokens: it's possible that you'll play an encounter and be unsure how the objective token activates, or it may say, only read this text if instructed to. In these cases, we promise, the game isn't broken, it's by design. In fact, depending on your performance or choices during the encounter, you may or may not ever even get to read some of these pieces of text or special rules of some objectives. The last thing that all encounters share is totems. Totems also come in a multitude of colors, where loot tokens are activated with a specific action called an encounter action, and objective tokens are activated given their special rules listed in the encounter itself. Totems will always be activated when line of sight is drawn to them, meaning as soon as an adventurer has moved into a position where line of sight can be drawn, they pause the turn in progress and read the special text for the corresponding totem. Cool. So, let's talk about some encounter-specific rules. So first of all, you might have noticed that during the setup, one of the loot tokens wasn't colored and instead had a white border and text. In fact, it's possible that an encounter might have you place a white totem or even a white objective. The back of all these token types are always white. We utilize white tokens in different ways. Anytime a white token is used during encounter setup, you should randomize the remaining tokens of the type shown and place a random one down with the white side up. So, for example, if the encounter had 2 white loot tokens in the setup diagram and 1 green loot token, you'd place the green loot token face up on the board, then randomize the remaining 3 loot tokens and deal 2 for the white tokens. This allows us to randomize certain elements of an encounter while fixing others. So, in the case of the white loot token printed in the encounter bombing the sickles, the players will randomize all 4 loot tokens and place 1. Then, when the adventurers pick it up using an encounter action, they'll get one of the 4 possible chests the encounter has to offer. This rule applies to totems as well, and will occasionally be used to randomize spawns and other things. However, objective tokens always activate using their own special rules, so it could or could not apply to them, depending on what the objective tokens and the special rules dictate during the encounter setup. Another important thing to keep an eye out for is the encounter's loot level. The encounter loot level represents the rarity of loot and how much gold drops in the area. In the case of bombing the sickles, the loot level is mundane. Let's talk about what this actually means. First and foremost, the loot level determines how to build the loot deck during the encounter setup. In Middara, the loot deck is used to gain rewards. Depending on the loot level, the composition of this deck changes. The rulebook shows a visual breakdown of how the deck should be built depending on the loot level of the encounter. Make sure to always check the loot level of an encounter when starting it. You don't want to get into your encounter and find you've been drawing crappier loot than you should have been. The loot level also determines what type of items are gained during the encounter. This means that any reward gained from a chest or from defeating an opponent during bombing the sickles is going to be of the mundane variety. So, for example, if an adventurer opens a chest that specifically says they gain a relic, the players would draw a random relic from the mundane tier. In fact, it's also possible that some rewards will specify a loot level when an item is found. In these cases, the player should follow the rules specified in the reward even if it contradicts the loot level of the encounter. Lastly, consumables function a little bit different as a reward. If the reward earned during an encounter is a consumable, adventurers would gain a random consumable from the current loot level or lower, meaning that if an adventurer was instructed to gain 2 consumables and the current loot level was uncommon, the players would shuffle the uncommon, common, and mundane consumables together before drawing 2. So, a bit more information about the loot deck. Let's talk about how it works. When players defeat an opponent, the adventurer who dealt the killing blow draws a loot card. There are 4 different types of loot cards: gold, item loot, unique loot, and monster loot. If an adventurer draws gold, The adventurer sets it aside to be tallied up and added to the party gold after reaching an end condition of the current encounter. Gold is the primary way that adventurers will buy new gear. While some encounters can be finished by simply getting to the blue exit and not killing any opponents, we advise against this because you need to kill monsters to gain gold, and any loss in gold will seriously set back the adventuring party in the long run. If an adventurer draws item loot, the adventurer who drew the card rolls 2 white dice and draws a corresponding random item from the current loot level. So, for example, if they rolled a 13, they'd shuffle all the available mundane tier weapons and draw 1. This allows adventurers to randomly gain new accessories, armor, relics, cores, or weapons during the game. If an adventurer draws the unique loot card, they'd shuffle all of the unique cards of the current loot level and draw 1. In the example of bombing the sickles, the loot level is mundane, so the adventurers would shuffle all of the mundane unique items and draw 1. Remember though, if a mundane unique item is currently for sale at a story round, it cannot be earned as a reward. So if the sentient bodysuit is up for sale back in town, you wouldn't shuffle it in as a possible random drop. Lastly, if an adventurer draws the monster loot card, they follow a special set of rules. The monster loot card represents the special loot that a specific monster type can drop. Because of this, it works a little different than the rest of the deck and isn't tied to the current loot level. Instead, what the adventurer draws depends on what opponent was defeated. Many opponents have a corresponding monster loot card. When the opponent is defeated, if the adventurer draws the monster loot card, they will draw a random card from its corresponding monster loot deck. So, for example, the Cave Sickle has 3 different monster loot cards that correspond to it: Chipped Chitin, Sickle Shell Charm, and Sickle Venom. If an adventurer defeated a Cave Sickle and drew the monster loot card, they'd shuffle these 3 cards and draw 1 randomly. Cool, so as a special note about the loot deck, any items earned as a reward is given to the adventurer who opened the chest, drew the loot card, or triggered the event. However, gold is always shared and earned as a party. Alrighty, that does it for reading encounters. In our next video, we're going to go over all the different things that adventurers have in front of them and how to use them. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you next time.